read this, do this, and write this paper, but I knew sort of the work being shared and the framework of the Gandhian principles was a potential way forward in my practice. The ideas for building communities while still maintaining who I was and who my students were foremost what appealed to me. The principles could be applied in practice regardless of race or religion or socioeconomic status, and they could be used both locally and global contexts. Importantly, it's to note like the learning that I acquired has spilled over into my own personal life. I really look at everyday actions that I can do to start to bring peace to my community in all forms and in my home life. But also a really good reminder that it's not perfection. If you're one of those A-type personalities, it's not perfection, or that you need to be perfect or the top of your field to do something. I think it's incredibly important to highlight. I think it's incredibly important to highlight that ordinary people can take part in these ideas and steps and actions, and that every person has the power and can make changes big or small, and that you just need to start where you're at and go from there.
Thank you, Christy. Lorena, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening. I'm Lorena Julio from Argentina. Let's say by degree, I'm a journalist and I have a master in public policies, but I consider myself an activist. I have been working in the human rights promotion and protection for the last 15 years. I worked at the Ministry of Human Rights in the province of Buenos Aires for 5 years, mainly focused on women victims of violence. After that, I moved to Washington, D.C. I worked at the Organization of American States, promoting the development of youth. I worked there like managing, coordinating the network of young leaders and young entrepreneurs. And while being surrounded by young entrepreneurs, I got inspired and I decided to start my own project, which is Fundación Comparlante. Fundación Comparlante is a non-profit organization that promotes the right of people with disabilities in Latin America. For the last 6 years, I have been working in this organization. We work mainly focused on 3 pillars. The first one is accessibility. We promote accessibility to promote inclusion in our societies. Let me tell you that in Latin America, there are 85 million persons with disabilities that they suffer exclusion and invisibilities due to the barriers that they face every day. So that's why for us it's so important to promote accessibilities. And the second pillar is art. We use art as a tool to create awareness, first on the capabilities of people with disabilities, to move, not only thinking what they cannot do, and instead we look the possibilities, what they can do. The third pillar is entrepreneurship. We understand that entrepreneurship is a tool for development. If a person with disability has a job, this means dignity. This means autonomous life. This means less dependency on their families or dependency on the government. So that's why we really promote and we believe in the entrepreneurship as a tool to create a society with more equity for everyone. So I'm really happy to share this space with you all. I'm happy to have the chance to learn from Monica, Christy, and Simone. Thank you very much, Riva, and thank you, Jai Jagat. Briefly, how I get to know about Jai Jagat. 2 years ago, I had the chance to study a leadership course in Kerala, in Trivandrum, in India, and I met there Raja Gopal. He introduced us what is Jai Jagat, so I decided to join the Global Peace Campaign, but also the march. So I had the chance this year to walk with the Jai Jagat group from India to Armenia. And now I'm part of this big family of Jai Jagat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorena. As you can see, we have a very powerful group of young women here to talk to you today. What we're going to do now is we're going to start with a question about slow peace. I'm sure you're all wondering, since it's part of the title, what this means. And so I will start with Monica, and I will ask her if she could please start by telling people what slow peace means to her, and then we'll pass it on to Christy and then Simone.
Okay, hello again. So I'm going to start by talking about social justice, as it is defined as the way in which human rights are manifested in the everyday lives of people at every level of society. Many issues related to human rights and equality can guide the direction of classroom routines. Doing the slow peace work, combined with my personal desire to acquire peace in my own life, allowed me to unpack the relevance of social justice in the classroom, which shifted my perspective as the fundamental guiding philosophy in my classroom became more intentional. Slow peace likely has different meaning for different people. I see it as a transformational process that starts with an awareness of what's wrong and what's important. Slow peace means you're making changes slowly, and during the process, you become more and more aware of practices that need changing. At first, it's the outright violent acts that you notice, but as time goes on, you realize the small infringements on humanity that need changing. Applying slow peace to our everyday lives means being kind in all circumstances. It is making eye contact and sharing a smile or a lunch with a homeless person. When one starts to notice areas where kindness can overrule, it's easy to give anonymously to people in need, or tossing earthworms to soil when drying out on the concrete after a rain. But sometimes it's not easy to respond with kindness. Ahimsa means no harm in thought, word, or deed. It means to show love for all. Being Christian, I try to follow the 10 commandments, but it's not always easy, just as causing no harm in thought, word, or deed is difficult. To treat your neighbor as yourself is a concept that is easy to understand and seems simple. However, possessing emotions and desires of the flesh often makes it difficult to practice in its entirety. These practices should include loving oneself, and this love must include forgiveness of others and self. We need to attempt to achieve a love for all, no matter the context of one's sins. I always try to understand what the other must be going through and attempt to forgive the most horrid of mistakes, since we all make mistakes. Often, this is not possible for many of us, especially when humanity feels the need to focus on the wrong. This is how hate perpetuates. Everyone deserves to be forgiven, or at least understood.
Thank you so much, Monica. We'll turn it to Christy now. Thank you.
Just similar to Monica, when I think of slow peace, I do first think of ahimsa and what it means to me. Ahimsa means to me to do no harm in thought, word, or deed. It was my starting place. What did ahimsa look like in my assessment practices? For example, did every student in my classroom need to have the same spelling words just because they were in a particular grade? Or did it mean I could run several lists based on developmental need? Could my students have access to readers and scribes and other forms of assessment that would show how much they really did know on a topic? Did my students have access to materials that represented them and their cultures and interests? Could they see themselves in the picture books and stories and lessons? How was my daily interactions and the language I used supporting them, and was it adding to the respect that they deserved and meeting their needs? Was my homework policy supporting my students? For example, did I give out homework? For example, I do give out homework, but it's individualized. Every student gets a fiction and nonfiction piece of writing and reading, an individualized math, and an individualized spelling piece. The package is handed out on Mondays and due back Fridays. There's no homework given on short weeks or on holidays, but if students need help, it's offered throughout the week. If they are not done on the Friday, then there is time built into my schedule to help them finish one-on-one or in small groups. Ahimsa helps me ask, did my classroom physical environment and practices help foster communication and community? My students are encouraged to sit in groups. We rotate the groups every 2 weeks. There is an opt-out option to sit out of the group, but the students have to choose that before the groups are made so as not to hurt anyone's feelings. Groups are computer generated and randomly chosen. Once groups are made, any conflicts that come up are opportunities to teach behavior and conflict skills in context. Ahimsa helps me answer, how can I include everyone and respect the individual needs? It has been a continual journey, and one of the phrases I cling to is, when you know better, you do better. For me, it is the constant reflection and the drawing back to the community I work with and for, and holding that against the framework of the Gandhian principles and the needs of my students that help guides where I go next.
Thank you so much, Christy. Simone, we'll turn it to you now.
Thank you, Reva. Listening to Christy and Monica, I'm the same. Ahimsa is the huge concept that supports me in what I do in my thoughts about slow peace. And one of the images I was thinking of while Reva read her poem is one that she created of the turtle dove, which is an image that we all hold dear to our hearts because it kind of explains slow peace, as in turtles move slowly, doves bring peace. So if you can hold that image in your head, I think that will help you understand part of where we all are coming from. Ahimsa, as was spoken, and there's our image, means no harm in thoughts, words, or deeds. So what I do in the classroom, I model building relationships, developing and supporting connections with the community, the classroom, and nature. Part of my journey towards slow peace was in the school I was at, very strong community interactions. Then we had some new administration come in. They did things like setting up cement barriers around the school parking lot to keep out the community. And that hurt me personally because the community was such a part of the school. They weren't going to be removed, so I had to think about, how can I bring this idea of peace and removing barriers to my community? So I had my students paint self-portraits on the cement barriers. So although they were still barriers, they were promoting the idea of peace. So that's one thing that I did. Personally, I am very much connected with the natural world, and nature moves slowly, just as peace develops slowly. It's interesting that peace can disappear very quickly, but it takes a long time to build it up. So over the years, as I have better understood Gandhian principles and the idea of ahimsa, I have tried to add that into my classroom so that I am building a foundation of how to work together in peaceful ways with my students, living the idea of ahimsa. I've been inspired by authors like Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, but she also has a beautiful photo book about the sense of wonder that nature can bring to you. And I wanted to bring this sense of wonder to my students. And that's how I'm living the idea of slow peace. I go forwards, I go backwards. The path is always changing and moving because my context changes every year. I don't have the same group of students. I don't have the same group of parents. But if I believe that peace comes slowly and that nature can help us connect to that idea, then every year we're all building a stronger understanding of what peace looks like. It builds slowly, but once the foundation is there, I believe and I've seen that it carries forward. The students that I taught in my school now 4 years ago have continued to think about ahimsa. They have continued to try and connect with nature and are curious about what is going on, because it's through nature that we are all connected. So slow peace is that feeling of connectedness, but it takes time and many steps forwards and back. So that's the meaning of slow peace for me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Simone. So just before we continue, I just wanted to do a kind of bringing together of the ideas that Christy and Monica and Simone have given us. So slow peace. As I said in our poem, small steps. It starts with ahimsa. It's about connectedness. And at the same time, it's about recognizing and honoring the individuals who are in front of us in our classrooms. And it's also about transforming barriers. And it's also about commitment over the long haul. This is not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be a project for our lifetimes and the lifetimes of our students. So what we're going to do next, the final question I'm going to ask our three teachers is, how do they practice slow peace? And as they do this, we'll have some images from their schools and classrooms so that you can get a sense of where they're working and a sense of their context. So for this question, I will start with Christy. And I will ask you, Christy, to talk a little bit about your practice. And Janmajay, if you would run Christy's slides while she's talking, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Reva. So when I started to think about the Gandhian principles and ahimsa, again, and inclusion, I really was trying to figure out a way that I could connect and everybody could connect. And really, when I started to strip away what was basic and what everyone needs, I sort of landed upon the idea of food. Food being a basic need and necessity, something everyone can interact and connect with, was sort of where I started. And then I sort of built that with bigger ideas in a real tangible way. For example, every year we make a soup, a vegetarian soup. We make this soup with small contributions from everyone, just to show that giving a little can be enough to feed many. We make this soup to celebrate our community and the fall harvest. If someone can contribute, or if someone can't contribute or forgets to contribute, we still have enough to cover everyone. Everyone tries a taste, and if you don't like the soup we jointly made, then we learn polite ways to express our feelings without hurting others. Thanks for the hard work. That soup's just not for me. Everyone cleans up in the end, and we all wash. We all wash our materials. We've used in previous years and continue to use reusable plates and utensils as a way to help promote and teach more healthy environmental ways to celebrate. We have done halal Rice Krispie treats. We learned that making these treats to show that everyone can be included. It may mean making a small switch, but we can also all participate and enjoy the activities together. Understanding each other and our needs, dietary or otherwise, is also important. And making these halal Rice Krispie treats in our community gives some of our Muslim students or students who have a halal restriction or practice a halal eating habit, that they're able to talk about it openly and celebrate it and be recognized. I also do my grandmother's gingerbread people. We make gingerbread people with the students and they get to decorate it. And it's really important in teaching students how to connect to our past. It's important for one of the best ways to connect through food and family recipes. It's amazing to see how many things we can learn from the past and how important it is to continue some of those traditions and share those traditions. It's also a special way to keep memories alive and getting to know your students. You can tie in curricular expectations from reading or writing or science units for building, but most importantly, you can also start to use food and the way that is shared and experienced as a way to talk about some of those big ideas. So how is food grown? How is it produced? You can have those conversations about biodiversity, ethical labor practices, environmental issues, food shortages, land rights, trusteeship, consumption, stewardship, social justice. All of these ideas can be tied into the shared experience while you're enjoying the food and while you figure out where your ingredients came from and what to do with your leftovers. After the pandemic and after ensuring that everyone had access to some sort of technology and setting up lessons, I started to think about what it meant to have a trauma-informed practice, because everyone was going through things differently and it was a trauma. In April, we started our kindness journals and we challenged them that every day, if they could do one kind thing for either themselves or their families or others, or the environment, even right where they were at, and to document what that looked like for them. In May, we focused on gratitude, stopping daily to pause and be grateful for things that are big or small. Learning an attitude of gratitude became our slogan for that month. June is creativity, practicing and sharing and celebrating all forms of creativity and expression, with weekly challenges to try to come up with something creative. Sometimes I've had financial supports for food items and ingredients, and sometimes not. At times I have had cooking facilities, and at other times not. Making the vegetarian soup was one of the recipes that worked great because it required so little contributions and could be made in a crock pot in the classroom. For some of the whole school things that happen, like donating items to the food bank or school-wide fundraisers, I've had other colleagues who have helped organize and run these events too. Sometimes I've had administrators who have supported my work, and at other times I've had administrators who are not much engaged at all. Again, the best part about this work is that you can adapt it to your own personal circumstances. Any problems that come up can be solved within the framework and the relationships you form with your kids. It also really helps to connect with other people who are doing this work and sharing their ideas and stories. You build on each other. As I continue to think about what my classroom might look like for the next year, or what we don't know or know about what teaching will look like, I'm still thinking of ways that I can make those connections with kids from the beginning. Ways of getting to know them on meets or the internet, drive-by social distancing house visits, and lesson changes that encourage forms of interacting with my classmates and having them interact with the environment around them.
Thank you so much, Christy. And now we'll turn to Simone to talk about her practice. And
Hello
Janmajay,
again.
if you could run her slides.
Thank you. So I've shared with you that I like to develop peace through nature. Personally, I've always felt a very strong connection with the natural world. Perhaps it was born from my dad's dream to be a farmer, even though he was living in an urban setting. Maybe it came from our moves from city to town and finally to the country. It may have been as a child living on a farm, how my family would take a walk in the evening and gaze at the stars. Or maybe it was just playing outside under huge pine trees with my sisters and building tree forts, taking my dolls swimming in the local stream. Maybe it was boating in the pond. Even though the pond was incredibly small, we would still boat on the pond and we would collect frogs. I was often outside exploring, observing, and collecting nature. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was my visits to the cabin at the lake where there were always bird books and flower books. So if you saw something, then you could take a look in a book and find out what it was. When I am with nature, I feel grounded and at peace. There's a sense of interconnectedness, of being one with the world. So personally, nature makes me feel peaceful. And I wondered, could connecting my students with peaceful connections with nature transform them and my classroom into a more peaceful community? As a teacher, I value hands-on learning. So my first step in nurturing peace in my students was to bring nature into the classroom. Although we may live in a city, the natural world still surrounds us if we take the time to notice. My goal as a teacher is to help my students notice rocks, plants, shells, sticks, feathers, photos of animals, original art, bird books, flower books, all matter of natural materials are available in my classroom for the students to interact with. I am fortunate to have a classroom with large windows, so there's lots of natural light. For many years, I've had animals in my classroom. My first one was a rabbit that the students carried around in a basket and built pens for and interacted with on a daily basis. Unfortunately, rabbits have hair and allergies soon arise. Then I had a salamander. One of my students brought the salamander to school in his pocket, and we decided to keep it as a classroom pet. That salamander stayed with me, I believe, for more than 10 years. One morning when we arrived in the classroom, Stripes the salamander was no longer moving. Made an announcement to the whole school about Stripes passing, and at recess, I had a file of students come through the classroom to say their goodbye to Stripes the salamander. And when that happened, it made me realize how important having these real creatures, these things from nature, in these children's lives. Naturally, we had a burial ceremony for Salamander down in the river valley and said our final words. So that was a real connection. Presently, I have a corn snake in my classroom. And again, part of having that snake there is to help the students understand that we are all connected, that we have a responsibility to care for aspects of nature, even if they make us feel uncomfortable. Snakes in a community where most of my students come from India and Pakistan are not really creatures that are well loved in many ways because they can be dangerous. So it's been an opportunity for both students and parents to learn about how we can care for a living creature. Because the students develop a bond with these things in the classroom, when we do go outside, they've already got a little bit of an understanding of how valuable the natural world is. They look at the things in the classroom, they feel them, they smell them, they touch them. They begin to wonder where they came from, what they're all about, and then that can transfer outside into the real world. Now, of course, many people don't have nature outside their classroom. I'm fortunate. I've got a small pocket forest outside of my class. And so when we go outside, the first thing we talk about is how to behave when you are outside. Because the students aren't familiar with being in a forest, many of them see it as a dangerous place. Many of them have been told, oh, homeless people live there. It's not a place where they want to go. But if I can model how we can move quietly, how we can use our senses to see, listen, and touch, we can learn amazing things from these natural spaces. So I first teach them how to move quietly. I teach them a signal to pull the class together. And when we go in, we move slowly. You need to take your time and point out things on the ground, things on the tree. You're listening, you're looking, and before long, the students are starting to explore that natural world. Now, they're not all looking under logs and bark. Some are trying to climb to the top of the tree, some are jumping, some are picking up sticks, and they're wanting to start a sword fight. They're young students. But within that, I can talk to them about what respect looks like, remind them of the idea of ahimsa, no harm in thought, word, or deed, and that includes the natural world. So if we take the time to watch that ant and see where that ant is going and know that he's supporting a whole community, they will be less likely to step on that ant. If I say, oh, listen, and I'm listening to a bird and we start looking for it, then they're going to start to notice the birds in their community. One of the things the students have done is once we're in the woods, they want to feed the birds. So we create bird feeders. We used not peanut butter, but no nut butter made from chickpeas, and we put it on paper tubes, rolled it in seeds, hung them out, and then we would go and check and see where the birds were eating the most seeds, whether it was up high, close to the ground, and then we could continue to feed them. So the idea of ahimsa moves from the classroom out into the natural world. Now, once we have been outside, we return to the classroom and we record our observations. We think about what we saw. We draw, we create poetry, even songs. And when we come in, it's amazing how calm the students are to return to our desk, to pull out our nature journal and write. The classroom is engaged. Being outside in nature has instilled a calmness, a sense of peace with these students. So nature comes into the classroom, we go out into nature, and then we bring it back in with reflections and connections. Nature is what connects us all over the world. And if we can have our students feel that connection, then they can connect with people, they can make choices that are going to make our communities and our world a more peaceful place.
Thank you so much, Simone. And now we'll turn to Monica.
Hello again. Okay, so when I think about what it looks like in the classroom, and I think about supports and barriers, I have to say that I think my greatest barrier has always been the curriculum, because when you have a heavy curriculum that you have to get through, then you're fighting with time all the time. So I'll explain how things shifted for me over time in my classroom as I incorporated slow pace. So there was a time when the rules in my classroom were typical of the mainstream of other classrooms. However, as I started to view the fundamentals of the classroom through a different lens, the organization of my classroom shifted. Rules that had no bearing on the effect of students started to dissipate, replaced by priorities that had a greater impact on the souls of students. For example, students in my classroom nowadays can be seen wearing hats, chewing gum, eating snacks. That wasn't always the way in my classroom. However, there is a very low tolerance in my classroom for any ill treatment or disrespect toward others. Mean comments and exclusive behaviors are addressed with immediacy and urgency. There is no tolerance for unkindness. We celebrate kindness and inclusion. How might this be done, you wonder? Well, it is the teachable moments that I cling to. And for example, if I see a student being kind for no particular reason, I might make a big deal about it and point out to the others what a great thing this is. After I notice these things and celebrate them, students quickly learn what's important and they start to tattle on others being kind. In my classroom, students have opportunities to participate in discussions about homelessness and are encouraged to think about a homeless person as a human being and how that could be them one day or a close family member one day. In my classroom, students will hear about how fortunate they are if they have choice in what they wear or what they eat. They will be reminded how unfortunate how unfortunate it is that we use drinkable water to wash our cars and flush our toilets. Yet, children in some places in the world have no parents because they got sick from drinking contaminated water. In my classroom, the goal is to encourage students to respect the feelings of others demonstrated by what they say and what they do. Classroom discussions often address needs of marginalized citizens in society. For example, homeless people, and also the marginalized in the school, students eating lunch alone. Over time, my focus shifted from the priority of getting through the prescribed curriculum to one of how to live together peacefully. It's about using the teachable moments to create peaceful outcomes and modeling and guiding students to focus on how their actions affect others. For example, when helping to solve disputes, I try to start conversations by encouraging students to think about what they did to contribute to the conflict and how the other might have been hurt by their actions. It's about being cognizant of your actions and how they contribute positively or negatively, and always about thinking of other. An admired mentor of mine once pointed out the error in anti-bullying programs in schools. Reva Joshi claimed the focus should not be on the word bully, but that in which we want to instill kindness. This resonated with me, and I soon noticed how often young students used the term bully. Years later, Reva visited my grade 6 classroom to work on a community project for the Jaijagat Peace March. We worked with students for an entire day, exploring and finally deciding on a topic to contribute to the Jaijagat cause. The students chose to collaboratively work on a cyber kindness campaign. Through the cyber kindness campaign, students relayed messages and instructions of how to be kind when making contributions to online social media platforms. Students were encouraged to be creative and were given few limitations in the formatting of their project, as they were encouraged to relay their message in any form of their choosing, whether it be through the arts, songs, dances, drama, or a more formal presentation, slideshows, documents, posters. Students who participated in this project taught me more than I thought possible. The reason this project was such a huge success was that everything was student generated, and allowing them to deliver their message in any media and seeing how enthused they were confirmed the importance of allowing students to be the creators. The enthusiasm and passion for the project surpassed my expectations. Students organized themselves into groups and collaboratively worked to make significant contributions to the projects. Many students artistically performed in ways I didn't think possible. Students created and performed songs, dances, raps, poems, skits, and newscasts. Each student's performance highlighted their talents. I think the greatest achievement in all of this was seeing many of these students I had taught for 3 years. And I think this project was a summing up of everything that we had worked toward. So when I first met these students 3 years, 4 years prior, I was at a different place in my piece in the classroom works. So to see that what they came up with, and it was all generated from them, was a sum of all that I had been working toward. And it was wonderful to celebrate it with Reva, and Jill came and witnessed. It truly was a miraculous project. So I learned the sky is the limit when students buy in and are encouraged to express themselves in the medium of their choosing. The Cyber Kindness campaign aligns the foundational theories of our Slow Peace group to do no harm in thought, word, or deed, which needs to be in the forefront of everyday activities in classrooms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica. Just one piece that I think comes out of the work that all three of you are doing in your classrooms is the importance of giving agency to the students and helping them to develop that sense that they are active participants in their community and that they are active participants in creating peace. So we're going to just move into a little break right now, but before we go, I just want to remind you that you have homework to do. And there are two things. One is that we would love to get some questions from you for Monica and Simone and Christy. The other is for you to think about what they have said and how that might inspire you to do something in your own classroom, your family, your school, or your community, and let us know. And Simone is holding up a little sign right now that says there's our website. It's www.slowpeaceinthelongmarch.com. all one word, Slow Peace in the Long March. And we will give that to you again later on, but please do take a little bit of time on this break. And before I turn it over to Gary, or to Janmajai, I should say, I wanted to let you know that we have a special treat on this break, and that is that you are going to get to listen to a trailer for a podcast series that will be launching soon. It's a series that's related to Jai Jagat, and we are calling it Speaking Our Piece. So you will get to hear that trailer, and you'll also get to hear some music. So thank you so much. I'll turn it back to you then, Janmajai, and we'll be back after the music.
Thank you. All right. There we go.
At this time, particularly when the whole world is in such turmoil, I feel that it is so much needed. The rays of hope are so much needed, and when somebody talks from their heart, people really listen.
I've done kind of semi-active volunteering for probably good 13 years or so. But like, I always felt like I was just by myself. And so the more that I get into it, the more I see that there are also other people in similar situations that have actually been doing all kinds of wonderful work. Doing a podcast, talking to people, sharing stories could be all part of it. And I think No matter how small it seems, I'm hoping that the podcast could actually bring all the small stories together and give people a sense of that they're belonging to something bigger.
I am excited to kind of connect with people doing nonviolence work in lots of different fields and lots of different